Prime Minister. We had reservations against GMOs because they do not only threaten the livelihoods of our small-scale farmers, but also pose a real threat to the health of every Kenyan as well as the environment. The ban that was imposed in November 2022 by the then cabinet was founded on these concerns. It is therefore important to demystify the impacts of GMOs and expose their propensity to be an existential threat to the biodiversity as we pride in as a country and our health. I therefore make the following remarks on this subject. Number one, the history of GMOs in Kenya. And bear with me, it's a 6-page small document. A genetically modified organism, GMO, is actually an animal or crop in which the genetic material had been altered or has been altered in a way that does not occur naturally. Genetic engineering is therefore different from natural breeding and poses special risks. In 2003, Kenya became the party to the Cartagena Protocol. Cartagena is a beautiful city, port city in Latin America. The Cartagena Protocol, which seeks to protect biological diversity from the potential risks posed by living modified organisms resulting from the modern biotechnology. It reestablishes an advanced, informed agreement procedure for ensuring that countries are provided with the information necessary to make informed decisions before agreeing to the import of such organisms in their territory. In 2012, Professor Gilles Eric Seralini, a professor at the University of Caen, France, did an experiment on rats, and rats fed on GMO maize and Roundup, weed killer, that resulted in kidney disease and mammary tumors. In fact, it was based on the Seralini findings inter alia the cabinet resolved to impose a ban on GMOs. The Seralini study remains the most in-depth study on the toxicity of GM foods and associated pesticide, and its key findings remain valid to date despite attempts to discredit them. Therefore, the rationale in arriving at this decision is that the threshold of safeguarding human health and by extension the lives of the Kenyan people was non-negotiable, even if GMOs look like an attractive solution at their face value. Number two, impact of GMOs in Kenya. The lifting of the ban opens up Kenya to diverse challenges and threats posed by GMOs. The Kenyan multi-billion food market, SSA, is susceptible to manipulation by profit-hungry multinationals, handing over our food sovereignty to corporate manipulators. B, our biodiversity and national pride in the identity of the organic Kenyan seed will forever be lost to mutated forms of crops. GM crops cannot coexist with organic and non-GM crops due to contamination. And imagine our small farmers, where flowering and things, smallholders, every small farmer will get the contamination I'm talking about. Thirdly, with the opening of the importation of GMO maize, call it BT maize, our generic seed companies and small-scale farming risk dying out of a result of unfair competition from subsidized GMOs and corporate capture by the multinationals. Fourthly, Kenya lacks adequate capacity to test GMO traits and the impact it has on health. We therefore place the lives and livelihoods of our people at very serious risk by admitting GMOs into Kenya. And fifth, admittance of GMOs into Kenya will also affect multilateralism, especially within the EAC community, whereby our neighboring countries that have banned GMOs and do export maize to Kenya we will not be able to compete with the cheaper subsidized GMO maize. Moreover, having not been consulted by the Ruto administration, the ban on GMOs would jeopardize trade within the EAC and cause unnecessary trade restrictions as the non-GM neighboring countries attempt to protect their citizens from Kenyan GMO crops. And I saw President Suluhu during the meeting with President Ruto yesterday, I think it was in State House, Dar es Salaam, talk of reducing the non-tariff barriers. This matter of GMO becomes a clear non-tariff barrier. Thirdly, corporate capture. Corporate capture is when the sovereignty of a nation has been taken control of by the commercial interests of big industry. In this case, the selfish interests of multinationals that would go through lengths, and I dare say even to the extent of quid pro quo, in order to seize our food sovereignty, is not in doubt in this regime, and this regime stands as an accomplice. And therefore the burden of proving they are not is really on their side. Against the backdrop of this lift, the Ruto administration had met several delegations who have been aggressively lobbying for the lifting of the GMO ban in Kenya. We are also aware that these multinationals have sponsored skilled research on GMO biotechnology calculated to reach a desired outcome. We also take issue with the National Biosafety Authority, NBA, which is a body tasked with the responsibility to regulate genetically modified organisms in the country and ought to be neutral. Instead, we have noticed with concern the way in which the regulator is one of the lead promoters of GMOs in Kenya. What is their motivation? We dare ask. As crusaders of moral practice, we are also surprised by the silence of the religious community, and specifically the church, which were once vibrant and vehemently against GMOs. Could it be that they have been pacified by this new administration and blinded to the moral and ethical question around GMOs that go against the order of nature? I call on the church to respond. We urge our religious leaders and faith-based organizations not to sell their soul, but to speak the truth at power at the altar of commercial interests and political expediency. The way forward, fellow Kenyans. Number one, Kenyans are heavy consumers of processed maize, and we produce an average of about 40 million bags of maize a year, yet our demand is about 55 bags of maize a year. Our deficit, therefore, is approximately 10 to 15 million bags of maize a year. Food security, my second point, should not be premised on maize consumption alone. We speak to all of us as Kenyans. There are other varieties of organic food such as sorghum, millet. Some of us grew on millet. And I can tell you, your only competitors are the birds. Sweet potatoes, cassava, etc. that can complement or substitute shortage of maize diet. Kenyans ought to be sensitized on the need to diversify their eating culture and be able to demonopolize their dependency on a few staples like maize and rice. Point number three, the low cost of BT maize is as a result of highly subsidized farm implements and sophisticated mechanized agricultural practices in the first world. Even if our farmers adopt the BT maize seed, this will not bring down the cost of maize, since the price is artificially manipulated by the profit-oriented multinationals. The government can plug this deficit. We dare offer this advice by supporting our farmers to produce more through better extension services, better inputs, climate resilient, and agroecological practices, be able to reduce post-harvest losses, and trade with our non-GM neighbors rather than resorting to the importation of risky GMO maize. Point number four, I'm now at page 5. I told you there are 6 pages. Science has shown gray areas as far as the safety of consumption of GMOs is concerned. This poses a grave challenge to already emaciated healthcare system in the long term. The dependence of GMOs on toxic herbicides is a threat to human health and the environment. The rush, therefore, to introduce GMO is alarming when the able-bodied in society, as well as many developed countries, are going organic. In fact, you go to any supermarket in Europe and you want to buy GMO food, the shop owners will tell you this is GMO, this is organic. And the organic food is more expensive than the GMO. This is the reality. We therefore must remain organic and avoid acceleration of food-related diseases such as cancer. Point number 5. Due to patents, our food system will be at the mercy of the multinational companies which own GMO technology, while our indigenous seeds and unique biodiversity will be facing extinction owing to the poor regulatory framework on GMOs in Kenya. In addition, Kenya fails to provide mechanisms for liability and redress in the event of possible harmful effects arising from the consumption and use of GMOs, or compensation for our farmers in case of contamination of the indigenous crops. We therefore direct National Biodiversity Authority as part of its mandate to ensure that these safeguards and redress mechanisms are in place. It's indeed their duty to make sure they are. Our point number 6. On such a weighty matter, especially as concerns food and food security, there should have been nationwide discourse through public engagement, education, and participation. The government did not engage in public participation, and we shall therefore be progressing this conversation to the National Assembly and to the Senate. We urge our leaders to take this challenge. Point number 7. The church and religious institutions need to add their voice to that of the civil society in condemning introduction of genetically modified food crops and pesticides in Kenya. Although it was 6-page, it's an important matter. It's actually a matter of life and death. Not political at all. Absolutely not. But this is our life. Fellow Kenyans, in conclusion, the long-term effects of GMOs in Kenya outweigh the short-term benefits, if indeed there are any. Reverting after opening our doors to GMOs would be a Herculean task. I therefore urge each and every one of us to take time and research into the truths that I've shared with you this afternoon. We must safeguard the safety of our future generations and protect our sovereignty at all costs from manipulation and penetration by foreign entities. End of the statement. Nawashukuruni sana. I'm not able to offer a comprehensive solution. But we have lived in this country long enough to know there are sometimes cyclical issues about drought. The management of drought, for example, we have the National Drought Management Authority, which I happen to know is trying a lot to see whether they can work, and we had the Deputy President call the stakeholders. That was a positive thing, to see how to deal with the matter of drought. But we must also come alive to the fact that the reality of climate change is perhaps even harsher now than ever before. I can tell you I was Minister for Environment one time, and my assistant was the late Professor Wangari Maathai, who remember won the Nobel Peace on the matter of environment. In fact, he used to use this example of the hummingbird, which would rush and carry some water in the leaves to do something. At least she was able to do something. The matter of the Shamba system was introduced when I was Minister for Environment. We dropped it like a hot potato. So you can imagine, if you're going to do Shamba system in Mao, the first casualty will be Mao River. And the next thing is the world wonder we call the world every annual event, the world beast migration will be a thing of the past. What are we doing to our children and our children's children? All because we need to catch up with some lost time in terms of raising and necessary funding, perhaps to pocket people's private pockets. So, one of the leaders, Sam, is here, the deputy leader, and this time we are not able to see deputy minority because we are going to court, yeah, to go against that ruling of my friend, Weta. He's still my friend, even if it occasions disharmony in the country. He knows it. Yeah, so we are ruling against that. I mean, you don't do those things. You don't. He's also a learned friend. You don't do certain things because future generations will look up. You remember today, Marende is a household name because what they used to say, Solomonic wisdom. So a ruling he made which actually affected me as a leader of government business. But you had to abide. So, ndugu Weta, tafadhali, usikubali manipulation. We ni ndugu yangu, tulikuta tear gas pamoja. Usisahau ndugu yako mwenzako, ambayo bado ako kwa madaki. We must stand for what is truthful and just in this country. Kwa hivyo tuenda kwa bunge na kwa senate vile vile. The senators wako hapa. I don't know whether Wambua is here, another deputy leader. Dan Maanzo is here and the others. We mean business to save ourselves. You know, as I say, this is not about politics. And I was there with President Kibaki. And there was a presentation to allow this thing, and we all unanimously as cabinet say, no. May Mzee Kibaki continue to rest in peace. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Papa Mtakatifu.
Allow me to finish this.
And he's a leader in these matters. Yes, sir.
So my next question is, does it mean now approval of this GMO will not give an opportunity to institutions like Kenya Seed to transform and produce seeds?
They will not transform, my friend. They will die off. Kenya Seed and the others. They can't match the level of competition by these multinationals. And I don't want to name names. We know them. They will die off. In fact, they'll be clamped with heavy legal costs on infringement of intellectual property. They will die off. Let's wake up and think about this. Nawashukuruni sana. Mtu wa mwisho. A big no. Until everybody is satisfied. So if you allow that public participation, maybe people will come and convince me. When you convince, then I can say no. But science, and it is all a matter of science, and science is what you are following. Science does not lie. Research, you send me quote a famous French scientist who was able to guide our decision as a cabinet in 2012. Kwa hivyo, science, but also I'm shocked. You know, I'm really shocked. Kenyans know I'm a believer. They do know. So I'm actually alarmed. I'm calling the believer community, tafadhalini. Yani mumenyamaza mpaka sasa hakuna yeyote. There may be the remnant of the church who stand up and speak. Yeah. Yes, sir. Was as vehemently opposed to GMO as I am. I think he probably had not looked at this. And I'm calling on William to also reconsider for the sake of this country. A leader is one who say, I'm properly guided, or let's discuss. But to lift the ban, and then you go to Tanzania the following day, alafu nasema, haya, mahindi yetu hampati. Njaa inazidi. Are we only going to be relying on kitunguu from Loitoktok, ambayo inatoka upande wa Tanzania? Even kitunguu may be GMO. I mean, BT common. What is it? BT cotton. Perhaps could be a reasonable something. I don't know. Because you have to really regrow our cotton and our cotton industry. But whether the GMO way, I'm not clear. Yeah. But at the moment, unequivocally, no. Because if you are a minority or majority, then that influences the number in the committees. Sindio? And this is a matter ambayo nimezungumza kwamba sisi wenyewe tuko kwa mahakama. In the meantime, we have given instructions to our leadership in the House to remain seized with this matter. And I know they are. That's why Robert Mbui is going there and others. Yeah. I used to be the chair of the House Business Committee. So I know. Sorry?
It's 50-50.
So it's 50-50. So that's not an issue. I think Robert can tell you that. So that's not an issue. The House Business Committee will be set up today. And we wish them well. And Godspeed. To be able to lead the country in this discussion. Tunaangamia zote tukiona bana. Hey, some people who are religious fundamentalists were hard to say, Yesu tafadhali, usitumane kuja wakati huu. Yaani maajabu haya, watu wameumia. Hakuje haraka jameni, tusipo kabla ya kuangamia. Unasikia my friend from CAS? I know my friends in CAS in London. Anybody else? Final. We addressed this matter in our previous communication. And we said, this is a country that has come of age in terms of our democratic practice. So if there is proper vetting of some of these cabinet appointees, in fact, since that time happened, I think one of them had some assault cases dropped against them. Maybe that's not good enough. Maybe too little, too late. I want to urge our members of parliament, the appointments committee, is it also being set up today?
Yes.
The appointments committee must take this matter very seriously. And I want to ask EAC and other governance institutions to really prove the what the Kenyan taxpayer has put on their table. Yeah, if there are people in the history, some of them have been governors, some of them have been whatever, and in the history, the charges that are supposed to be leveled against them. And I want to ask the DPP as well to cooperate in these matters. We know people at the highest level who got their cases dropped, but the files are still there, and they are subject to this vetting. So Kenyans, but without being unnecessarily abrasive or being punitive in any manner, let us follow Constitution 2010. And those committees of parliament, I want to talk to them now. We know the moment you have set up these committees, these candidates will come with big envelopes. They will come with big envelopes to bribe you. If you accept any of them, heaven will take after your case. Because